Welcome back to Reading Every X-Men Comic Ever, the weekly series where I read, recap, and rank every X-Men comic ever. This week was all Dazzler, and it's actually the last full Dazzler section, as we make great headway toward the end of this run. I read issues 32 through 39, written by Mike Carlin, Jim Shooter, Tom DeFalco, Linda Grant, Bob DiNatale, and Archie Goodwin, with art by Mark Bright, Goff Isherwood, Frank Springer, Tom Morgan, and Paul Chadwick. I also read the Dazzler the movie graphic novel and the Beauty and the Beast 4-issue miniseries, and I'll get to those a bit later. That is a total of 13 issues that I've read this week. Man, were they inconsistent in quality. Some were good, some were okay, some were mid at best. I mean, the past couple of weeks of really good Uncanny X-Men issues and the peak mutants definitely don't help, but even without those comparisons, these issues just don't hold up that well for the most part. Issues 32, 33, 34, and 35 are all good examples of what I mean. You have Daz helping the mutants deal with rogue villains Blackout and Moonstone, and then after that, Allison gets a gig in a music video, but it turns out the director has been causing accidents for publicity, and she exposes him on live TV. She then becomes a model, but gets teleported away with a bunch of other models as part of a petty revenge plan from a competing fashion designer. Then, needing rent money, Daz goes on a job hunt, eventually finding one as a waitress at a girls-only bar. And when a roller derby team barges in and causes a ruckus, Daz beats the shit out of them without even using her powers. None of the things that happened in those 4 issues really matter for the character. Again, I don't think any of those issues are necessarily bad, but they just feel very Silver Age, very episodic. I know the series has always kind of been episodic in nature, especially compared to other books, but at least the stories were interesting in the beginning. I don't know if you guys remember the whole Galactus thing, or the Darkler, Doctor Doom and Nightmare. I don't know. If you guys like this type of episodic comics, then maybe you'll like these issues more than I did, but just in the time frame, we got these 4 issues of Dazzler. We had the Demon Bear arc in New Mutants and the Wraith War crossover issues in Uncanny X-Men. And I know which of these 3 series I would rather read. Speaking of comic releases in that same time frame, the 12th Marvel graphic novel, aka Dazzler the Movie, came out, written by Jim Shooter with art by Frank Springer. While it's not quite on the level of those other mutant books, it is still quite good. This book takes place between Dazzler issues 34 and 35, and follows Allison as her LA-based stalker and old man in disguise, Roman Nakobo, convinces her to star in a movie he's making. In the process of making this movie, it comes out that Daz is a mutant. Despite the heavy anti-mutant sentiments, the movie gets made, but right at the finish line, the sexist evil billionaire that was funding the movie decides to pull the plug. Unless he can own her, Daz punches him in the face and destroys the movie. It's a pretty good story and sets the stage for a lot of later plot points, as well as giving Daz an upgrade to her powers, as she can now store the energy produced by the sounds she hears and release it later. It also gives more of a ground level view of mutant hate in the Marvel Universe. Now, mutant hate is a fairly common occurrence in X-Men titles. I mean, almost since their conception, mutants have been an allegory for the oppressed. At this time in the mid-80s, they were particularly being used as an allegory for gay people, but today I think you can see mutants as an allegory for almost any type of minority, whether they be of a different gender, race, or sexuality, albeit some of those allegories may fit better than others with the X-Men, but regardless. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that this book is a great representation of the hate these groups got and continue to get to this day, especially seeing as I'm not part of any one of those groups. However, I do think it's an interesting look, as it's not a view we very often get. Most of the time, the mutant hate stuff we are shown from these books comes from the government, with people like Henry Gyrick or Valerie Cooper, or those who are close to the government in some way, like the Trasks or William Stryker. Occasionally we'll hear about the public mutant hate, but I feel like we very rarely see it. So in this book, when we actually see these swaths of seemingly normal people protesting the movie and attacking Allison, it hits closer to reality than I would like, and I may be wrong here. It may not be a good representation. I don't know, but if you have a different take, please let me know. I would love to hear it. Mutant hate becomes a recurring theme and plot point in Dazzler's books, and the repercussions of it on her are especially prominent in the 4-issue miniseries Beauty and the Beast, written by Ann Nocenti with art by Don Perlin. And in this, Allie teams up with Beast, and it takes place between issues 35 and 36. Dazzler, dealing with the ramifications of being outed as a mutant, decides to join an underground theater group, but runs away when she starts losing control of her powers. Beast comes to her rescue, and from there their relationship becomes something more. The pair is shaken as Allie unwillingly falls back in with this group that turns out to be an underground fighting ring for mutants. Beast tries repeatedly to make Daz realize that this Coliseum and its leadership are bad news, but she keeps falling further down. On his last attempt, he discovers that they have been drugging her in a way that affects her control of her powers, allowing them to gaslight her into believing that they are the only ones who can help her. Learning this, and then almost killing Beast, snaps her out of this control, but it's a little too late, as the ringleader of this whole operation reveals that this whole thing was just a way for him to build a loyal army of mutants capable of defeating his father, Victor Von Doom, and taking over Latveria. All the Doom interludes in this book, and the subplot of the child that believes they're the son of Doom, did not prepare me for ringleader of underground fighting pit is an exceedingly evil wannabe Latverian insurrectionist with daddy issues who compliments Hitler and Napoleon. That part kind of came out of nowhere. Now, this is a superhero book, so the heroes do win in the end, thank God, and Doom shows up to shame the guy for ever thinking he could defeat Doom or that he's even his son. I feel like we didn't really need the Doom stuff or the insane twist for this to be a decent book, but it is what it is, I guess. This then brings us to the last 4 issues of this batch, Dazzler 36 through 39. 36 and 37 continue the trend of episodic stories that don't matter, with Allie getting a job as a singer at a club, but getting attacked by an old homeless guy from the sewers who tries to scare off so the piano player, who is his ex-wife, can get the spotlight, and Daz going to the house of a childhood friend only to discover that her friend has been turned into a living computer and has lured the people that did it to her to the house so she can kill them and herself. 38 does change the status quo of the character more, as she actually goes to the X-Mansion to train with the X-Men. Wolverine isn't on board at all, and challenges her every step of the way because he doesn't believe she's doing this for the right reasons. To prove herself, she posits that the final training exercise will be a surprise 2-on-1 fight of Colossus and Wolverine versus Dazzler. And Dazzler ends up winning. This is actually the start of Allison's attempt at heroism, complete with a brand new super suit. And her start at the hero gig goes okay. She saves some kids in a van that has fallen partway down a cliff face, and she even gets a villain of her own, a scientist who believes Allie is the one responsible for his daughter's current mental state. So he's built a suit designed to kill specifically mutants, hoping that killing the Dazzler in front of his daughter will snap his daughter back to reality. However, Dazzler's troubles for that night don't end there, as she's picked up by a bounty hunter named O.Z. Chase, who has been tasked with capturing Allison for bail jumping, but it's clearly something more sinister than that. These last 2 issues are definitely an attempt for this comic to be more serialized than episodic, and I would be lying if I say I wasn't a little intrigued where this goes. However, that's where we leave off for the time being. We won't be returning to Dazzler until we get to Secret Wars 2 in about a month, as issue 40 is a tie-in for that event. That, however, is in the future. For now, we need to discuss the rankings of what I covered this week. And there's actually a fairly even spread of 5s, 6s, and 7s, which was a bit surprising to even me. Speaking of surprises, something I want to start doing is when I finish a series, it gives that series as a whole a score. In this case, we finished Beauty and the Beast, which gets an appropriate 6.3. Anyways, if you've gotten all the way through this video, I really, really appreciate it. If you liked it, please hit the like button or the subscribe button so you know when I post next week. And next week, we are looking at a couple of X-Men-centric mini-series, as well as the last 2 issues of Marvel Team Up. See you then.